Tears of the Kingdom is coming out so soon, and with that right around the corner, I want to tell you about Breath of the Wild and why that game was so flippin' monumental, and it just kind of reinvigorated an entire franchise. So today, we're going to dive into that game as a whole and my sort of rocky relationship with it. In the beginning, I didn't love the game, but now I've beaten it 3 times. I absolutely enjoy the heck out of it. So let's get started by looking back at Breath of the Wild and then talking about how monumental that was and how that's going to carry over and make Tears of the Kingdom one of the best games of all time. In 2017, the world finally saw Breath of the Wild. This was a game that was planned to release all the way back on the Wii U in 2015, but it kept getting pushed back and delayed because it wasn't ready yet. That sound very familiar? I'd hope so, because that's exactly what's happening with Tears of the Kingdom. That's why when they announced those launch dates in the early trailers, you gotta just take them as a grain of salt, because honestly, it's always gonna be changed and adapted and delayed until the game is absolutely perfect, because the Zelda team has a standard of quality that some other studios should flip and start putting into their games a little more. I'm not trying to name any names, but I think we all know who I'm talking about. So, yeah. Even though these games barely ever come out when they're announced to be coming out, that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. I love that they delay their games and have so much confidence in the product that they know that it needs to be delayed because they need to make that perfect game. Anyways, back to talking about the launch of Breath of the Wild. This game launched with a brand new Nintendo system called, of course, the Nintendo Switch, which was a perfect console with a perfect game. Yeah, I said it. So looking back, people are like, the frame rate's not great, the graphics aren't great, the performance is blah, 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 blah. At the time, Breath of the Wild was monumental because you gotta think of this, we're coming from traditional Zelda games, and we go over from this game into a completely open, brand new world, free to explore wherever, whenever. It was pretty monumental because of how much it harkened back to the core of what Zelda is, and that's exploration. And just finding joy and exploring and wandering around the world. Breath of the Wild brought it back. And yeah, there's some flaws, but at the time, those flaws were completely overlooked because of how important this was for the franchise as a whole and overall gaming as a whole. It changed the way that open world games were made, and you cannot overstate the importance of that. So to get a little personal here, this was the first Zelda game I beat. I had previously played Wind Waker on the Wii U port, but I didn't end up beating it because I wasn't really captivated like how I was in Breath of the Wild. Of course, that's not a knock against Wind Waker or anything, but nothing quite drew me in like I was with Breath of the Wild. Now, at the beginning, I will admit I didn't have the easiest time with it. I would either get stuck or just not understand the combat well enough to take on certain bosses. But Breath of the Wild had something in it that was truly captivating. As I progressed through the world, albeit very slowly, there was always something that piqued my interest and had me coming back. I would stay up for hours just hunting down different shrines or attempting to cook a multitude of different concoctions. It was so much fun, but eventually I did feel that the world was a bit too big for me to make progress, and I just gave up. So back in 2017, you have to understand that I was not the veteran of games you see before you now. I was pretty new to them, and if they frustrated me or I got lost in them, I just dropped them, because why did I need to waste my time on something like that? At least that was my old mindset. Obviously now things have changed, but back then I just didn't have patience for that kind of stuff. Of course, me dropping this wasn't the game's issue or any design flaw, it was completely my own fault, but at the time I just didn't really have the time or want to invest the time into this game to figure it out. I was really busy with school and different sports and having a social life, so I kind of let Breath of the Wild fall to the wayside. But every now and again, I would remember the game. I would think of how fun I found different shrines or unlocking different parts of the map. Now, at the time, I did a ton of traveling for volleyball. I played at a club that was around 2 hours away from my hometown, and my mom would drive me there after school. And I realized that this is 2 hours of my time that I wasn't using for anything except for the occasional car jam. So, I decided to pick up my Switch again and unlock the entire Breath of the Wild map. And I did that within a week. By the next week, I had finished 2 of the 4 Divine Beasts, and by the next I was finally fully back into the game. I ended up making time to finish this game, and what changed was how I didn't think of the world as too open and overwhelming anymore. I thought of it as a playground for me to come and explore. With my invigorated love of Breath of the Wild back, I made my way to maybe one of the best side missions in any game of all time. Tarrytown. When you begin this side quest, you see this flamboyant contractor and his homies, and they're just building houses. And you go out and you help them. And then they offer to build you a house. Then they build you a house. And then I had a lot of fun with this because every time I would go to the Divine Beast, they give you special weapons, right? But I was scared to use them because they broke like every other weapon in the game. So what I did is I took all of those weapons and I displayed them in my house, and they still are displayed there, and it's stunning. So I really enjoyed that side quest of it. So then I go to school and I tell my friends how cool I thought it was that we could have a house in Breath of the Wild. And they were like, oh yeah, you can also make a whole town. And I was like, are you kidding? So then, of course, I go back and I make a whole town called Tarrytown. Tarrytown is super cool because it's useful. It's not just a town that you make one time and you never go back and visit. Tarrytown has the Hylian shield. It has a great marketplace, and it has tons of other armor and accessories and fun NPCs to talk to. It's a really, really great side quest in every single way, and I hope so much that there's another one like this in Tears of the Kingdom, because god dang was Tarrytown the best side quest of my entire life. So by being brought back into this game, I finally felt comfortable enough to really attempt to beat this thing. Beating a game of this caliber was something that I really had never attempted to do. I did play Skyrim as a kid a ton, but I never did anything more than pickpocketing people, running from the police, and adopting dogs. So beating Breath of the Wild was about to be a pretty big deal. With a lot of trial and error, I made my way to Calamity Ganon with a Master Sword and a Hylian shield, a multitude of hearts, and a ton of Divine Beast abilities. I took on Ganon and I beat him, and this was the first time I had beaten a Zelda game. This was the first time I had poured hours of my life into a game and beaten it. That feeling I got was absolutely euphoric. People love Zelda for so many different reasons, but I love Breath of the Wild because of how I felt after I beat it. But that was just my experience, and a ton of people bought and played this game and loved it too. At the time, this did a ton for the Zelda franchise. This was the first mainline Zelda since Skyward Sword on the Wii, which was one of the most polarizing games. It was also after A Link Between Worlds, a game that was really great, but it was very tried and true to that Zelda formula. This game broke from the mold and did it in a way that was so true to what Zelda intrinsically is. I mean, the first ever Zelda game on the NES was a cryptic hellhole, but it was all about adventure and exploration and carving your own path, and that's exactly what Breath of the Wild harkens back to. It captured a sense of freedom and exploration that had been forgotten in recent years. At the time, Zelda games favored a more linear, story-based approach, and Breath of the Wild took that and flipped it on its head and took major inspiration from that first ever Zelda game by modernizing it in the most faithful way it could. The story of a boy becoming a hero and taking on the world to save a princess was always at the forefront of that original game, and that again was at the forefront of Breath of the Wild. The complaints did of course come, as no game is perfect to everyone. People missed the dungeons, and they wished the story was a bit more cohesive. And of course it wasn't like a perfect performing game. And there was even more gripes that people had. But at the end of the day, these complaints really didn't match the sheer love and praise the game would receive for years to follow. Breath of the Wild allowed people to have more freedom and be creative in a world they could shape to their very will. There were tons of speedruns and mod videos all over the place on YouTube that was breathing new life into this game even years after it had come out. Honestly, props to Point Crow for bringing so many new people into the game, and I hope that the whole copyright strike situation gets remedied. There being so much content around this game all the time had really pushed Breath of the Wild to the forefront of people's minds. This game was essentially unanimously beloved. Regardless of if the person is a fan of the Legend of Zelda franchise, they could still be a fan of Breath of the Wild. My boyfriend is someone who doesn't have a ton of experience with Zelda, but when I gave him Breath of the Wild to play, he was immersed in the world. The gameplay loop of Breath of the Wild was truly something special, and it was something that resonated with just about everyone. Zelda fans, non-Zelda fans, young people, old people, and everyone in between could find something that they absolutely loved about this game. Truly, Breath of the Wild was one of the first of its kind, and it showed the rest of the gaming industry what an open world should be, and set that golden standard. Hey, by the way, if you're having a good time, consider hitting that subscribe button, because, I mean, we're on the road to 5K, which I didn't think I would really ever say, and I'm super excited about it. I stream all the time. I have tons of Tears of the Kingdom content coming out. I mean, you're just going to stick around, alright? So subscribe. Yeah? Now it's been 6 years, and we're finally getting a sequel to the best game ever made. Tears of the Kingdom is coming out literally tomorrow. Tears of the Kingdom is expanding on that openness in every possible way, and it looks to be making its mark on the industry as a whole, just like the previous game did. Early impressions of Tears of the Kingdom are unbelievably high, with people like Spawnwave thinking it's going to score better than Breath of the Wild. People say that Tears of the Kingdom makes Breath of the Wild look like a tech demo, and people are absolutely loving the game already, and it seems like Nintendo really listened and heard the complaints people had with Breath of the Wild, and aimed to remedy all of that in Tears of the Kingdom. This is a game that looks like it will be taking over the next 6 months of my life, and I'm really excited to dive in and see if this can overtake my love for Breath of the Wild. The creativity alone looks to be something wholly original and new, and hopefully this again will set that standard for future open world games. Tears of the Kingdom looks to be a perfect game, and it seems like Nintendo really did us right. So if you liked the video, I want you to check out this video because you're also going to like this one. So check it out. It's a discussion where I talk about Tears of the Kingdom coming out with Nintendo Memories. He's a good content creator as well. So check out the video. All right, I'll see you over there.